collection are very much worthy of revisiting. Anytime I revisit the Bagwell buoys that I train with, it's really something else. It's like another training session with the master. As I mentioned in my previous videos, I got in touch with Bill Bagwell in the early 2000s to get my custom buoys ordered from him and to have him design it. But also, it was during those times and the conversations that I had, especially when he was designing the buoys, sometimes I just call him to see how things were coming along, and then he would turn the conversation into one big coaching session on buoy combatives. And I really miss that now that he's not around. The one thing that he did tell me is that the more time I spent with his knife, he said that you're gonna learn something with the use of it. And it was something that he said to me back then, where he said that the knife itself is going to teach you how to move. That was something I never forgot that he said, because it was his way of saying that he built it so that not only is it optimized for buoy combatives, there are going to be nuances in there that's going to teach me how to move with it. So it was his way of saying some sort of objective knowledge out in the air that somehow I need to get either from the ether or from him, that it is through the philosophy of use, meaning moving with the knife, that's going to teach me. But he was very specific that you can't just go around using any sort of knife. It had to be the kind of knife that he had designed. Him being the premier buoy knife maker possibly of all time, but also happens to be one of the premier buoy knife combatives instructors in the world, I took him at his word, so I trained a lot with the buoys that he made for me. And I gotta tell you, the way I move with it right now, as much as I owe a debt of gratitude to my instructor Sifu Armando Basulto for teaching me a lot of this, so many reps with those knives and just learning every nuance, every inch of the knife so that I knew where it was in my hand, how I moved with it at all times, turned all of my years of moving with them into really a lesson with the master. Of course, credit to Master at Arms James Keating for his videos and his DVDs so that I had that to review as well whenever I moved. Having the three of them be absolutely great resources is something that continues to contribute to my growth in buoy knife combatives. With this buoy knife that my younger brother and my girlfriend at Blade Show 2024 got me, this is a whole other subject of study. It's like feeling like a white belt all over again. It feels like taking a graduate course from Bill Bagwell as far as knife fighting is concerned, because this curved handle here, what I've found over the time that I've been training with it, was, in my opinion, his way to be a little educative with regards to the back cut. And what you'll see is that the way this handle just fits into my hand, you see that curvature here, and you see how it falls in line with the natural curve of my palm. What that does is that this part of the stag handle, whenever I do a back cut, what it does is that as I start to initiate the back cut from my shoulder, this handle actually pushes up on my palm. It's a really interesting dynamic, because as I start to do this, I don't have to do anything else. The handle pushes up on my hand. This is very different from, for example, this very well executed Cold Steel Natchez, a beautiful knife, really light, really fast for its size. However, when I do this back cut and I start to do this, the mass of the blade falls this way, but I don't feel the pressure in my palm. I actually feel it in my thumb, because it doesn't have that extra curvature to kind of push my hand along. I'm feeling this in my thumb and index finger, but primarily my thumb. This is very different when I am moving with this Bagwell buoy, where when I'm here, I don't feel anything in my thumb. I feel it all here. It's almost as if Bill is standing here and he's going, hey, push it up here, and it just drops on its own. So what's really cool about this buoy back cut, and I'm going to be demonstrating it for you, once I initiate the movement for the buoy back cut, because I'm getting this pressure from the handle, it's almost like Bill is saying, relax, the buoy knife is going to take care of it. So I just do this, and it just falls on its own, and it goes right back. So the buoy back cut comes from here, it pushes up. The other thing that I really like about it is because if I go the opposite way to do a reverso, this portion of the handle starts to pressure me in the right, it starts to give me this feedback so that when I'm here and I let the knife fall, this acts as a counterbalance. So it actually goes away from my hand. So when I do a normal back cut to a reverso, it's almost like the knife does all the work for myself. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because it is very important to my audience who are looking for the right Bowie knives for themselves, for their Bowie knife combatives. Make sure if you're moving with a Bowie knife, if it's too much work, that's not the Bowie knife for you. As much as I love the Cold Steel Natchez, I think it's really good for snap cuts because it gives me that right pressure. When I go here, I feel that immediately in my palm, so it transfers through. But that is not the case with the back cut. The back cut, the pressure lands on my thumb. So not really optimized for the back cut. This one, I would say, when Bill made it, I think he made this to be a type of back cutting machine, but also, as mentioned in my previous video, a way so that when I switch it this way, it's one hell of an edge up tool. I can use the spine of it, which happens to be thicker, so that I can beat off of his knife and go straight into the sharpened false edge into my target. But today what we're going to be focusing on is how this back cut, how this portion of the handle promotes the back cut, promotes the reverso, which then leads me into this edge up configuration. I really hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for letting me share. In the age of no pain, no gain, moving effortlessly with a Bowie knife seems like anathema, but that is exactly how we should approach moving and training with a Bowie knife, especially one that is exceptionally designed, which is a custom Bill Bagwell Bowie. He designed his knives so that you let the knife do all the work for you. Take a look at the correct posture that I happen to be in here. What facilitates the correct movement of the Bowie knife is good footwork synced with good posture. So then when I extend my arm, the Bowie knife just drops on its own. And as mentioned earlier, this is a complex multi-factor movement, meaning that it's not just the weight distribution of the knife, but the handle itself presses into the mechanoreceptors of the palm, which allows me to integrate myofascial sling movement into the back cut of the Bowie knife. Take a look at how that pressures into my hand, and as I shift my weight back, the knife naturally falls on its own and flows into that cut or into that stab. This is what makes working with this knife specifically so educative, because as I move correctly, the Bowie knife falls correctly on its own with as little effort as possible. Take a look at this combination here, because you most likely missed what just happened, because as I'm moving with this combination, I am taking advantage of the handle's capability to switch effortlessly into edge up orientation. Because the stag handle design allows me to get feedback from the movement of the knife, I have options to either transition into an edge up orientation, which is a separate paradigm, or maintain in the edge down orientation so that I can maintain the original Bowie back cut curriculum. For Bill Bagwell, a knife handle doesn't just have to be comfortable. It has to exceed that criteria and expectation. It has to be educative, and his sophisticated understanding of human anatomy allowed it so that when I move with this superior blade, it also gives me the feedback so that my body can function at an optimal rate. Now let's take a look at the Cold Steel Natchez Bowie. I always have this concern that it's going to get away from me, and it's because of that handle design. Because I'm not getting feedback from the bottom end of the handle pushing into the mechanoreceptors of the palm, most of that weight is going to be on the thumb and index. So it's always going to feel like only two fingers are actually navigating the knife rather than the entire arm line and the myofascial line. So this is part of the reason why the knife can feel unwieldy when you do a Bowie back cut flow, whether it's in the downward orientation or upward orientation. So you can still do both if you decide to get this Bowie knife. This is a very good production Bowie knife, but it's very different from a custom Bagwell because you don't get that educative piece. You don't get a handle where it tells you how to move with as little effort as possible. As mentioned in my previous Cold Steel Natchez Bowie video, in that review, I talk about how it moves pretty well as a very light and fast cleaver, and I stand by that. So when you see me moving with it and applying a Bowie combatives curriculum to it, it's like trying to apply it to a very well-designed combative cleaver, and there's nothing wrong with that. For my personal preferences, I prefer to make sure that it stays within the snap cut line, because if it starts to move in any lateral fashion, it puts a little bit of pressure on the finger and thumb, and there's always a sense that the entire knife is going to get away from me. In this sense, the lifetime value of a well-made Bowie knife is how it provides me opportunities to refine and develop the art within myself. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.